GS412.
This old-time radio program was originally aired live, long before the advent of high fidelity. As a result, you may detect an occasional surface noise or volume drop due to transmission problems so common to old radio. We hope, however, that any variance in audio quality will not take away from your pleasure in listening to this, one of the all-time favorite shows.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, spring is back, and with it, Will Rogers and his alarm clock, all the way from Hollywood, California, brought to you by the makers of that good Gulf gasoline. With Will Rogers tonight are Gulf headliners, Frank Tours Orchestra and Miss Helen Gleason of the Metropolitan Opera Company. But just a minute before we begin tonight's show. As I said, spring is back, and it's time for every motorist to think about that worn winter oil in his crankcase. You know, winter oil takes punishment, and when it gets full of dust, sand, carbon, it means that your motor is going to take punishment too. Well, now here's an easy way to find out the truth. Drive into your nearest Gulf gasoline station. Ask the dealer to give you the famous Gulf screen oil test. He'll take one drop out of your crankcase, put it on the filter paper of the test-to-drop, and you can see for yourself whether the oil needs changing. You do the looking and you make the decision, new oil or old oil. But don't take any chances. Ask your Gulf dealer for one of those interesting cards that show actual specimens of the harsh abrasives that may be in your crankcase right now. Then ask about the small cost of having the crankcase flushed with crankcase cleaning oil. It takes only a few minutes. It will thoroughly cleanse your crankcase, and you'll avoid putting fresh, clean oil in a dirty crankcase. And while you're there, don't forget that you can give your car added pep and running smoothness by filling your tank with that good Gulf gasoline. 40,000 service stations are ready to serve you. Well, now, Will Rogers is waiting for us in California, and here's Frank Tours Orchestra with a tune that lifts the curtain. All right, Frank. Now to Los Angeles, California for Will Rogers and his famous alarm clock.
Hi, covered it, yeah. Well, here we are, we're right back out in California, the old orange juice belt. The old Sunshine State. Of course, it didn't show up today. We ain't had any sunshine, rain instead. Well, anyhow, well, you know, I figured out it's peculiar. It's a peculiar state of affairs that exists, and everybody that is doing better than there was 3 or 4 years ago, or making more money, has got in for the president. But they don't seem to realize they're doing better on the money that he's spending. You see what I mean? Doing better on his money. Now we all know that the government is spending all this money, and it's not a good state of affairs to exist. The country's in bad shape when there ain't nobody spending any money but the government. But now, what you going to do about it? Of course, one remedy would be for the people that have money to for them to start spending it instead of the government. But that seems just about as unpopular as the Roosevelt idea. In fact, it's worse. Well, if we sit out and passed a bill tomorrow and said the government can't keep on spending this money, but for government to exist, somebody has got to spend money. So from this day on, from this day and date, the government's going to stop spending money and make it compulsory that the people do the spending. Boy, what a howl would go up from that, you know. They couldn't make that law stick. People would say, no, we saved it, and we have worked and we've made it, and we got the right to do as we please with it. So that little idea is out. People ain't going to spend, so that's out. So what other idea we got? We got to keep on working with ideas here. Well, if the government is throwing this money away, the only thing I see for the ones that are throwing for the ones that they are throwing it to, outside of those that are absolutely in need of it, you know, well, the only thing I see is have them refuse it, you know what I mean? If you don't believe in what Roosevelt is doing with this money, why refuse it? It becomes, just say, no, it's government money and it's tainted, and I don't believe in the government. And I don't believe in the government spending all this money, and hence I don't take any part of it. And you say, no, you have paid this out. Now, for instance, take me, for instance. I'd say, no, the government paid this out for the people to eat, and here they are coming to see my pictures with it. I don't agree with that at all, you know. Now, you can imagine me saying that, you know what I mean, but if I was that, it would be the way to look at it, you know. I ought to refuse to accept the money. It's government money. I don't believe in the government spending this money, so I'm not going to take it. Here's a man that maybe wants to pay his loan at the bank. Well, maybe the RFC loaned him the money. You know, they're doing that a lot. And they get the money from the government, and they go to pay the bank. And the bank says, I don't believe in... The bank, naturally, all the banks says, I don't believe in the government spending all this money. But when the man comes to pay his loan with government money, they don't say, no, I can't take it. I'll just carry you myself. Boy, what a laugh that'll be. Yeah. Now, of course, it's going to cost the taxpayers a lot of money to loan this fellow the money to pay off his loan to the bank. You know, it's going to do that, but nevertheless, they kick on that, but they don't refuse to take it. They ought to say, well, no, I ain't going to take it. I made the loan, and it was me that made it, and I should be the one to stand by it. But you haven't heard that, have you? I haven't done it, maybe. Well, anyhow, there's not a person in America that received a dollar, no matter where it comes from, you know, just received a single dollar, and no matter where it comes from, that it hasn't grabbed it, you know, without asking any questions about it or not. It might have been paid out for a leaf for a starving child, but if it reached us, we was the starving child. It didn't make any difference. But so the only thing I see for the fella that don't believe in all this spending is to not participate in receiving any of it. I can't very well legitimately criticize a fellow for spending money if I receive some of it without any criticism in the receipt of it, you know. I mean, if I don't believe it's so, I ought to at least make a little attempt to say that it ain't right when I grab off some of it. So this $5 billion that they're starting in to spend, we all know that that's too much money. It's too much money to take out and throw away or give away or whatever to do with it. We know that. We all know that. But until we refuse to take some of it and it comes our way, we ain't got much right to holler. Now, that brings us down to taxes. You know what I mean? That brings us down to taxes. And, boy, when you bring us down to taxes, you're going to hear a howl like a pet coon. You know, brings us down there. This money coming from all the government is thrown away. Well, it just sort of looks like it might come. Where is it coming from? Everybody says, where's the money coming from we're spending? Well, I don't know, but just offhand, I'd say it's coming from those that have got it, you know. Now, I don't know. That may be just a rough idea of mine. I don't know, but I kind of believe that's where it's coming from. There's one good thing about the American form of government. The fellow that's got nothing, he don't pay nothing, you know. And, two, lots of times the fella, he has got something, but, and he ain't got any money to pay, you know, to pay. He's got some, but he ain't got nothing to pay his taxes with. But he can at least let him have the property back and get an even break anyhow, you know. But the big yell comes nowadays from the taxpayers, the big taxpayers. I bet you when the Pilgrims landed at Plymouth Rock and they had the whole of the American continent, you know, to themselves, you know, just them and them Pilgrims there, they landed up there, and all they had to do to get an extra 160 acres was shoot another Indian, you know. Well, I bet you anything, they kicked on the price of ammunition, you know. I bet they said, what's this country coming to? You know what I mean? Right, like we're doing now. You know, what's this country coming to? You know, this country coming to that we have to spend a nickel for powder. Of course, they got the lead back after they dissected the Indian. But no matter, I don't know, it's funny. No matter what we pay, I don't care whether we pay high taxes, low taxes, medium taxes, or anything. The yell is always the same. 100%, you know what I mean? We just yell 100%. Of course, we know our government is costing us more than it's worth, but do you know of any other cheaper government that's running around now? I mean, do you? I mean, if you do, I mean, they'll sell you a ticket there anytime. Now you can try Russia. I was over there. Yeah, you can try Russia. There's no income tax in Russia, but there's no income. Now Hitler ain't got no sales tax, you know what I mean, but he ain't selling anything. All right, fine. Mussolini, you don't have to pay a poll tax to vote in Italy, you know, but nobody votes, so. Now the whole question is, how can we make such a holler on what the government wants to collect back from us, you know? The thing is, you know, it looks like we can't have everything like we want to, you know? And, but the whole question is the government, how much of this money, which we are asked to pay back to them in taxes, have they paid us? You know what I mean? You know, we must have got quite a little divvy of it, some way or another, indirectly, admitting, as everybody does, that the government is the only one spending money, and if they're the only one spending anything, and anything we're getting must come from them. It looks like an endless chain to me, only when it reaches our length, while we don't want to cut any back into the kitty. I don't know what it's all about. This is just to kill time up here till something else comes out. I don't know. I don't know any more about this thing than an economist does, and God knows he don't know anything. Everything nowadays is just to make talk. Now, but next week, I'm going to present to you my scheme, you know. You see, every man nowadays has got a scheme to bring us out of the wilderness, you know. Well, not so much to bring us out of the wilderness as to bring himself out, I mean, you know. I've been studying the Townsend plan and the Long plan and the Coghlan plan and the Roosevelt plan. Hoover, he broke out with a plan here the other day. And I'm working. Maybe I'll do it next week. I don't know. I get around to it. I'm working on what's called the Rogers plan. You know what I mean? Rogers. Yes, sir, the Rogers. Yes, sir, the Rogers plan. Just about 3 more Welsh rabbits every night, and I'll be ready for the Rogers plan. You know? I'm going to have it in shape, you know. Anyhow, don't do anything. Now, don't sign up with any of these other plans. Don't you boys sign up, because I believe I've got a better offer for you than any of them. You know? And don't be too critical of the present plan. You know, if the Roosevelt plan is working for, you know, for as long as we're all living on the loot, well, we can't holler about it, see? But remember now, about next week, I'm going to give you the Rogers plan. I'm just working on a few planks of it there now, and I ain't got it quite in shape. But I don't care what they offer you, I'll do better. You know what I mean? I'll do better. I'll do better. Oh, say, wait a minute. Wait, I got to tell you about the movie that started out. This isn't what it started out to. I'll tell you about the movie. You know, they're figuring we're watching the legislature, and if we put certain tax on, they say we're going to leave. One gentleman, Mr. Sam Goldwyn, this morning says we're going to England. Where are you going? I tell you, I bet you we don't go nowhere. I bet you that we don't go east of Vermont Avenue. I mean, we're going to England. The movies is we're in an industry that kind of depends on the goodwill of the people, and they overlook the biggest thing in all this moving. You can't get much goodwill by dodging taxes, you know, because I don't care where you go, they'll bring you in there, you know, and say, you the boys don't pay anything, you know. But those guys that says you don't pay nothing, they ain't there next year, you know what I mean? They're washed up and gone home somewhere, you know. Now, they ain't going to go. But I don't know where we're going to go. If we go to New Jersey, I can see, here's a scene from New Jersey. You know, you folks on the radio maybe can't see this like my audience here. Here's Miss Greer. Here's an actress playing a scene. Oh, in front of the camera in New Jersey. I love you. Oh. Damn those mosquitoes. I love you. Now say we go down south. They're talking a good deal about us going down in North and South Carolina somewhere. Well, those are wonderful states. I've been down there a lot in the great old states and all, but naturally the influence of the people would have an effect on you. Now if we go down in North and South Carolina, I can just see Greta Garbo coming before the screen. You know what I mean? After mixing with all those North and South Carolinians and I love that dialect and all, and Greta Garbo says, yeah, I sure do love you, doggone, I sure. Yes, sir. Yes, I sure do love you. I think I'll go home. I ain't gonna mess around here no longer. Oh, here, wait, I ain't through. I got a lot to do. Goodbye. Next Sunday night, look for the Rogers. Good night.
Thank you, Will, and we'll be waiting for you same time next Sunday.
I know. How's that for that? Well, now, anyhow, another little announcement. On last Sabbath evening, I referred to the Pilgrims, our Pilgrims landing on Plymouth Rock. Well, boy, you ought to wait till I heard from New England. I split New England just wide open. It seems there's a town up there called Provincetown, and they have adopted a slogan which says, don't be misled by history or any other unreliable source. Here's the place where the Pilgrims landed. This is by unanimous vote of the Chamber of Commerce of Provincetown. Provincetown has been made the official landing place of the Pilgrims. Any Pilgrim landing in any other place was not official. If he landed on Plymouth Rock, it just served him right, that's all. It served him right. Nothing but a chicken should be named after him. Plymouth Rock, that's that's for the town people. You country people got that gag. That's for the town folk. Plymouth Rock, not a white leghorn. All right. Country folks are smarter than city folks. You never have to explain a joke to country folks. For who but a chicken or a seal or a pilgrim would land on a rock anyhow? Now, in the first place, I don't think that this argument I've created up there, it's terribly important. The argument that New England has got to settle in order to pacify the rest of America is why were they allowed to land anywhere? That's what that's what we want to know. As a race, there's never been any comparison between a pilgrim and an Indian. Now, I hope my Cherokee blood is not making me prejudiced. I want to be broad-minded. But I'm sure that it was only the extreme generosity of the Indians that allowed the Pilgrims to land. Suppose we reverse the case. Do you reckon the Pilgrims would ever let the Indians land? Yeah, what a chance. What a chance. The Pilgrims wouldn't even allow the Indians to live after the Indians went to the trouble of letting them land. Well, anyhow, the Provincetown officials, they sent me a lot of official data that when the Pilgrims landed, they found some corn that the Indians had stored and that the Pilgrims were about starved and that they eat the Indians' corn. And they claimed that the corn was stored at Provincetown. So then you see, the minute the Pilgrims landed, they got full of the corn and then they shot the Indians, and perhaps because they hadn't stored more corn. I don't know. Of course, but they'd always pray. That's one thing about a Pilgrim. He would pray, mostly for more Indian corn. But you've never in your life seen a picture, I bet any one of you have never seen a picture of one of these old Pilgrims praying when he didn't have a gun right by the side of him. You know what? That was to see that he got what he was praying for. Well, anyhow. Well, now we got to get on something important here. California has been crowing around about having no dust or no storm. But the last day or so has been mighty cloudy, and it looks just like it did when I was back in the Middle West a week or so ago. It looks like it's going to rain, but it don't. They say that the dust is headed west. California is great to pass laws. The legislature is, and they're just liable to pass a law prohibiting the dust to come into this state. We have a legislature that'll do it if you just remind them of it, I know. I've been reading a lot about this dust, and I've been reading a lot in history, and Rob Wagner's script. It's got a story about it, was good, and all these. And that's how every civilization since time began in the whole world has been covered up. It's been this dust. It's a terrible thing to happen to those people that are out there in the Middle West where it is happening. But on the other hand, it's a great tribute to feel that the Lord feels that you have a civilization that is so advanced in the rest of civilization that it is the first place to be buried under. I mean, you know, there's something in that, you know what I mean? Just think of our Middle West. I didn't think at first that we was that smart in Oklahoma and Kansas and Texas and eastern Colorado, but our Almighty, He must know now that it would ever cover up California for the same reason. I got my doubts, so civilization out here has not reached that point of perfection where the Lord sees fit to cover it up. He might see fit to cover it up, but not on account of civilization. It'll be to keep somebody from looking at it or something. My wife and daughter has just returned from a trip down in Egypt, and they went way up the Nile, flew up the Nile, and went in at Luxor and went way down, she told me, hundreds of feet down in underground that had been covered by the dust and storms of centuries and centuries to see old King Tut and Ramesses and the old Pharaoh's tomb. That was a great civilization, see, buried in the blowing sand, see. Any old civilization they've ever dug up to sometime, they go down and find 2 or 3 layers of civilization on them. All been covered up because they plowed underground that they shouldn't never plowed under in the first place, you know. And they cut down a tree that never should have been cut down anyhow. You know, we're always talking about pioneers and what great folks the old pioneers were. Well, I think if we just stop and look history in the face, a pioneer wasn't a thing in the world but a guy that wanted something for nothing. That's about all, you know. And he was a guy that wanted to live off of everything that nature had done. He wanted to cut a tree down that didn't cost him anything, but he never did plant one, you know. He wanted to plow up land that should have been left to grass. We're just not... I don't know, we're just now learning, you know, that we can rob from nature the same as we can rob from an individual. All he had was an axe and a plow and a gun, and he just went out and lived off nature. But it's really, he thought it was nature he's living off of, but it was really future generations that he was living off of, you know. Now, Roosevelt, you remember here a couple of years ago, do you all remember this? Roosevelt suggested planting millions of trees in all the dry regions, you know. He said, every so many miles we'll put a row of trees clear across the country. Well, the Republicans had one of the best laughs they've had since 1928 when they read that. Says, imagine the government going into the tree planting business. What a nut idea. And it was nutty. It was so nutty that it'll be about 10 or 15 years before they'll be compelled to do it. That's how nutty it was, see? Remember another one of his ideas when he took the young boys off the roads and off the streets and put them in these CCC camps and had them all planting some little trees. And the press had they had a big laugh. I remember reading in the paper, you know, they called them sapling planters. He said, look at these young kids, they got them all planting saplings around. Well, if the sapling planters had started in about the time the Republicans took over the government from Grover Cleveland, we'd today be able to see the sun. But now wait a minute, you Democrats. It wasn't all Republicans that did that. The old Democrat had an axe too, you know what I mean? In fact, that's all the Democrat has had for years was an axe. He ain't had nothing else. He's practically had to live off of an axe. He had nothing else, you know, but of course until here lately he's traded his axe for a post office, you know, and he's got that now. He's living off the post office now. But I must get back from these political parties and get back to civilization, for there's nothing in common between politics and civilization. Ain't nothing common between those two at all. If as history has shown, the Lord does bury each succeeding civilization, and
buries them in accordance to the advancement of the people in that neighborhood. I feel proud that I come from that particular Middle West belt. I know that William Allen White of Kansas feels proud, and Amon Carter of Texas feels proud. If a civilization had to be buried as it becomes advanced enough, well, we feel proud that we're the ones to be plowed under first, that's all. In years to come, the archaeologists, if I got that right, I'll say archaeologists. That word, right? The archaeologists will dig and find Claremore, Oklahoma, and people will come there to the ruins and dig down and say, here lied a civilization, you know what? Well, then later on, they'll unearth the state capitol, you know, and then eventually, as Washington is covered up on account of its being the least civilized, it'll be the last place covered up. They will excavate in there and find the old capitol and decipher some of the old hieroglyphics, you know, that people of those days humorously call laws, you know. They'll feel all them, and they'll come from the four corners. I bet they come from all over the whole country, four corners of the earth, to see what queer race lived there, you know. And they'll find places called banks where the money changers were, you know. Men who in those ancient days lived by interest alone. Oh, there ain't no telling to what all they want. Oh, wait a minute here. There ain't no telling. Oh, shoot, I just got started telling you what all they're going to dig up in Washington. But, goodbye. Good luck to you. Thank you.
Toastmaster, gentlemen, you too, politicians. The Democrats are the middle-of-the-road party. The Republicans are the straddle-of-the-road party. So I hereby nominate Mr. Henry Ford for president and christen the party the all-over-the-road party. In the first place, it's too bad he is so competent. That is the only thing that'll beat him. Mr. Ford's a good friend of mine, and years ago, he overlooked a suggestion that would have made him immortal. It was when he went over to stop the war. I wanted him to take the girls we had in the Follies and let them wear the same costumes they wore in the show and march them down between the trenches. Believe me, the boys would have been out before Christmas. He has made more money than any man in the world by paying the highest wages. Yet, he don't even manufacture necessities. Neither would you call it a luxury. It just kind of comes under the heading of knick-knacks. I was at his home last year and happened to ask him that in case of stiff opposition, just how cheap he could sell his cars. He said, why, Will, by controlling the selling of the parts, I could give the cars away. He said, why, those things would shake off enough bolts in a year to pay for themselves. And the second year, that's just pure profit. People think Dr. Couey was the originator of auto-suggestion, but Mr. Ford is. He originated auto-suggestion when he made the synopsis of a car. He has just recently lowered the price, $50. That's done to discourage thievery. He is the first man that ever took a joke and made it practical. So let's let him take this country. Maybe he can repeat. He should make a good political race, as he carries 2/3 of this country now. There's no reason why there shouldn't be a Ford in the White House. They're everywhere else. He's the only man that could make Congress earn their salaries. He would start a bill through and give each one something to tack onto it. When it come out, it would be ready to use. He is the only man that when Congress started stalling could lift up the hood and see what was the matter with it. Some are against him because he don't know history. What we need in there is a man that can make history, not recite it. Now, if Mr. Ford will just take another one of my suggestions, he can be elected. That he will just make one speech and say, voters, if I am elected, I will change the front on them. Ladies and gentlemen, now I have spoken in all kinds of joints, from the homes of the rich on Fifth Avenue to telling jokes in Sing Sing. But this is my first crack at a political speech, and I hope it flops. I don't want it to get over. If it did, it might lead me into politics, and up to now I have tried to live honest. Now, a great many think I was sent here to speak by my candidate's opponent, but that is not the case. I don't know him, but he must be a scoundrel, because from what I have read of politics, every opponent is a scoundrel and a tool of the interest. Ain't that what they call them? Now, I have just investigated tonight before coming on the platform and found out which party my candidate was running on, as I think every speaker should be familiar with every phase of his subject. Now, I don't know or have never met my candidate, and for that reason, I am more apt to say something good of him than anyone else. I was asked to do this by one of the Roosevelt boys. You know that nobody ever could refuse Roosevelt. Now, I find a peculiar case in my candidate. Most people take up politics through necessity or as a last resort. But I find this guy was wealthy before he went in. Not as wealthy as he is now, but still he was rich. Perhaps that's what he went in for, to protect what he had. As they say, there's honor among them. His principal political handicap is that he was educated at Harvard. But I understand he has forgotten most of that, so that brings him back to earth. Before going to Washington this last term, he was for 4 terms slumming in the state legislature at Albany. On account of his wealth, he is the only man in the campaign that you can accept a cigar from and smoke it yourself. He is the only man in Congress who owns his own vest suit. He is the only politician outside of Henry Cabot Lodge that can get into the front door of a Fifth Avenue home without delivering something. I thank you.
This concludes the first part of this cassette. Please turn the cassette over and begin again on side 2.
You know, the national problem is in this country today is not who shall be relieved and whose money shall relieve him, but who shall be the one that plays Santa Claus and actually hands out the presents, you know. That's the main problem today, is who hands out the presents. Huey says he should wear the whiskers. And Ickes and Mr. Hopkins, they say no, since we've got sleigh bells ourselves. Governor Talmadge down in Georgia, he had a plan. It hit a rut and knocked him right out of the bread line last week. It's been a bad week on plans all around. I'm not going to get discouraged, though. In fact, these other failures, well, they've given me confidence, you know. More hope that my plan will be a success. Now, my plan, to state it in a nutshell, and in fact, that's where all plans come from. And the nuts should never be cracked. But here is my plan in a nutshell. My plan is a plan to end all plans. It's to do away with all plans. That's what it is. There ain't but one place that a plan is any good and that it'll really work, and that's on paper. But the minute you get it off a sheet of paper and get it out in the air and it blows away, that's what... Now, Mr. Roosevelt, he dragged more he schoolmarms out of little red schoolhouses. And they had more plans than they had shirts. He could ask for a new plan and they could drag a fresh one out quicker than they could a fresh pair of socks. Republican presidents, that's one thing about Republican presidents. They never went in much for plans. They only had one plan that says, boys, my head is turned, just get it while you can. And
somebody come along and they use that with a plan to plow under part of the cotton. We did, and other nations like Brazil found out where we plowed it under, and they come and dug it up, and now they've got more cotton than we have. Somebody had a plan to teach hogs birth control, and now it's a habit with them. Now you can go out and find a deer quicker than you can a hog now. Somebody had a plan to plow under every third acre a week, and the wind come along and blew out the other 2 acres. It was all a fine plan. It was a fine plan, well carried out. We wanted to raise commodity prices, and Mr. Wallace, naturally, he wanted to give the farmer a profit, the same as the manufacturer. But now we find there's more people eating than there is raising. You see, that's why you can never get the thing straight with the farmer, because there naturally is more eating than there is raising. And if you get things too high, the guy that eats is going to come in hollering, you know. So that's what they're kicking on now. They're kicking, so plans just don't work. If they're milk and honey to you, they're poison ivy to somebody else, you know. NRA, that was a fine plan. It was based on the theory that everybody that had should help those that hadn't. That was all the NRA ever was. But the minute we found out that while it might be helping the other man, it certainly wasn't helping us, and it blew up. NRA was started with a lot of parades and ended in almost a revolution. Father Coughlin's got a plan. Oh, now is Father Coughlin, know him, a well-meaning man who would like to help his fellow man to better his condition. Whether his plan will work or not is another question. But even if your plan don't work, it ain't any discredit, you know. Our own Savior had a plan, in fact, 10 of them. He left them to us, and he knew they'd help us, and we know they'll help us. And he said, love thy neighbor as thyself, but I bet there ain't 2 people in your block that's speaking to each other. We know there should be no war. We know that old people, maybe they should get $200 a month, or maybe more. We know that everybody should share the wealth. We know that all these things, we know them all in our own heart, but I don't know, we just ain't going to do them, that's all. You know, we know them. Now, Huey's plan of share the wealth, it's a marvelous idea. And our own downright conscience tells us that there's no reason why anybody should have more than you. There ain't nothing wrong with the plan, only just one little defect. Nobody ain't going to share it with you, that's all. I know a lot of tremendously rich people that should share their wealth with me, but they just don't see it my way. Then I know folks that ain't got as much as I have that think I ought to share with them. Well, I just can't hardly see it that way either, you know? That is, even if I can see it that way, I'm not doing it. Well, we take the case, for instance, of Huey. Suppose Huey was asked to divide his publicity with the other 95 senators. Now, what a fine thing, you know. Say, Huey, we just want you to split this publicity with them, see? Well, that'd be just like getting J.P. Morgan to split what he had with the Navajos or something, you know. Morgan would say, well, why should I split with the Navajos? I got nothing in common with the Navajos. Well, that's what Huey would say. Why should I split with the other 95 senators? I've got nothing in common with them. Now, everybody got a plan. Congress got a plan. That plan is to pass all resolutions that have an appropriation connected with it, see? Anything that has an appropriation, Congress will pass it, see? They'll vote it, but they don't vote where the money's coming from. That's what Congress' plan is, to keep it a secret where the money is coming from. That's one of that plans. Mr. Hoover's got a plan. I don't know exactly what it is, but it's got something to do with moving east next fall, a year from this next fall. Ogden Mills used to be Secretary of the Treasury, very able man. He's got a plan. His to see that Mr. Hoover don't move east. He says that he's got more money than Hoover and is naturally more able to move himself. Teddy Roosevelt Jr., he's got a plan. His is that there should be a Roosevelt in the White House, but not this one. Mrs. Roosevelt, she has plans, plenty of them. She plans to do bigger and more things during the next administration. Now, the Republicans, they got a plan. That plan is to do nothing, and then Roosevelt can't either. The Democrats, they got a plan. Well, they got millions of them. You couldn't hardly mention all of that. But the Democrats' plan is next year is election year. See? Hold the post office, boys. They shall not pass. That's all. Big business has got a plan. Theirs is, they talked to Mr. Roosevelt, says, quit trying to reform us and give us a chance to recover. Roosevelt says, can't you reform and recover too? Well, but big business answer is no, we can't do anything with a cop on every corner watching everything we do. They say, give us a chance, and honest, when we're able, we'll reform. And then besides, they asked Mr. Roosevelt, Mr. Roosevelt, we never know what you were going to do next. Roosevelt says, neither do I. He said that. So it just seems, all these plans, but none of them pleases everybody, So my plan, which is still in the nutshell, is when a senator, a congressman, or even a man of great ability comes to Washington with a plan, is send them to Russia. Yes, sir. That's the home of plans, Russia, they eat and sleep and drink plans in Russia. Now my plan is don't plan. Whatever you do, don't do it purposely. Live haphazard, just kind of go through life haphazardly. Well, even more than we are now. There's nothing in the world as common as an idea, and there's nothing in the world as hard to carry out as an idea. So let's all just kind of call a moratorium on plans. If the Republicans would forget their main plan, which is to get into the White House, and the Democrats would forget their main plan, which is to stay in there, and the others, all these various third parties, would just look at their history, which shows that none of them ever did get in there, why, we'd all recover overnight.
Mr. Toastmaster, traffic chiefs from all over the world, I am here to represent what is left of a vanishing race, and that is the pedestrian. Now, while you birds have been directing traffic in all of our big cities, I know more about it than the whole mess of you do. I've been dodging it. Why, you even have to towers built up in the air so you won't get run over yourselves. That I am able to be here tonight is not any thanks to you. I owe it to a keen eye and a nimble pair of legs. But I know they'll get me someday. I'm not as young as I used to be, and they're missing me closer every day. Just yesterday, I had to run in a store and shut the door in the driver's face to keep him from getting me. Another chased me into a building, and I hopped into an elevator. That's all that saved me. Now, in my younger days, I could have stayed on the sidewalk and dodged these fellows fairly. Taxicab drivers nowadays are the same fellows who run the submarines during the war. They duck down and they don't come up for 3 or 4 blocks. Some towns have the streets all marked off with white lines. It's a sort of a game. If the fellow running the car hits you while you're inside those white lines, it don't count. He's got to come back and run over you again. Before we had traffic officers, there was not near as many people killed outright as there is now. But there was more hurt, which proves that by having a traffic officer to properly direct you, the driver can finish his victim where, in the old days, he could only hurt him. So, I think your association can well report progress. Prohibition has helped the pedestrian a little, as the drivers are afraid to run over just anybody, as it might be a bootlegger and they would get the tires all cut up. Here are a few rules which I want you to adopt. Eliminate all right and left-hand turns. Make everybody go straight ahead. Rule 2, eliminate all streetcars from the streets. They only get in people's way who are in a hurry walking home. Third, to speed up traffic, have a man hired by the city in each block to do nothing but crank stall Ford cars. 4, nobody is to drive on Sunday but just the weekend drivers who don't drive any other day. Then all they can hit is each other. Have everybody going east go on Mondays. Everybody going west go Tuesdays, and so on. That's the only way you will ever make the streets of the United States safe for democracy. At the present rate, in 2 years, there will be no pedestrians left. So where will you birds' jobs be? I see the sign is up to go, so long. You know, these talking machines are great things. When you come to a theater or movies to see some of us and you don't like our act, you just kind of out of courtesy, you have to stick and see it through. But on one of these, if you don't like us, you just stop the machine, take the record off, and accidentally drop it on the floor. Then the only annoyance we cause you is sweeping up. Now, folks, all I know is just what little news I read every day in the papers. I see where another wife out on Long Island near New York just shot her husband. Season opened a month earlier this year. Prohibition caused all this. There's just as many husbands shot at in the old days, but women were missing them. Prohibitions improved their marksmanship 90%. Never a day passes in New York without some innocent bystander being shot. You just stand around this town long enough and be innocent, and somebody's going to shoot you. One day there was 4 shots. That's the best shooting ever done in this town. It's hard to find 4 innocent people in New York, even if you don't stop to shoot them. That's why a policeman never has to aim here. He just shoots up the street anywhere. No matter who he hits, it's the right one. Robberies. Did you ever read about so many robberies? I see where some of our cities and towns are talking about being more strict with these robbers. When they catch them from now on, they're going to publish their names. They've been having every kind of a week here in New York. Mile week, apple week, one called Don't Get Hurt week. Taxi cab drivers couldn't hardly wait till the following Monday to run over you. Everybody's talking about what's the matter with this country and what the country needs. What this country needs worse than anything else is a place to park your car. What our big cities need is another orange in these orange age stands. This is where a New York society woman is suing her ex-husband again, claims she can't properly support that child on $50,000 a year alimony. Somebody's been feeding that young one meat. Lots of people wondered why we left our soldiers in Germany so long. That's so they could get the mail sent to them during war. We had to leave them over there. 2 of them hadn't married yet. I'm off Ireland for home rule from now on. I read an Irish paper the other day and it says liquor is 18 cents a quart. Can you imagine a nation wanting more freedom than that? See where the Ku Klux is coming into New York? Yes, they're here. I'm no fool. You ain't gonna get me telling no jokes about them. Did I ever tell you? I don't know whether I did or not. Did I ever tell you about the first time I ever had any of my, I ever had any stuff in that daily? Well, I'd written some fool thing, and it pertained to the bill that they was arguing, or that they was kidding about, rather. And at the time in Congress, it's in the Senate, rather. So some senator read my little article, and anything that a senator reads goes into the record. And as it was during his speech, it naturally went in. So, well, another senator rose and said, you know, and as they always do, if you've ever seen them, does the gentleman yield? They always say that. But they call each other gentlemen in there. But the tone that they put on the word, it would be more appropriate, you know, the way they can say gentlemen, you know what I mean? It'd sound right if he come right out and says, does a coyote from Yale, from Maine yield? You know what I mean? That's about the way it sounds, you know. He says gentlemen, but it kind of sounds like coyotes, you know. And then the man says, I yield, you know, for if he don't, the other guy will keep on talking anyhow. And so the coyote from Maine says, I yield to the polecat from Oregon. You know, he don't say polecat, but I mean, he says gentleman in such a way that it's almost like polecat. Well, anyhow, that's the way they do. They're very polite in there. And, well, anyhow, But I must get back to my story. When this senator read my offering, the other senator said, after all the yielding was all over, and the other senator said, he says, I object to the remarks of a professional joke maker being put into the congressional record. You know, meaning me, see? Taking a dig at me, see? See, they didn't want any outside fella contributing. And, well, he had me wrong. Compared to them, I'm an amateur. And the thing about my jokes is they don't hurt anybody. You can take them or leave them. You know what I mean? You know, you say, well, they're not funny, or they're terrible, or they're good, or whatever it is, but they don't do any harm. You can just pass them by. But with Congress, every time they make a joke, it's a law. You know, and every time they make a law, it's a joke. So since then, I've had my lawyer. I've got a lawyer there in Washington to protect my interests. And every time they put any of my stuff into that congressional record, I'm going to sue them. I sue them, and here's the grounds I sue them on: for putting my material where it won't be read. But listen, no kidding. They're a likable bunch of guys. And say, do you take the congressional record? If you don't, you do so. Have them send you a copy all the time. Don't they? They'll send you one. Right then, they'll send you one. There's some mighty good stuff in there sometimes. Put in here all the articles in this month's issue is by Huey. But they got some good writers in there, but a lot of them are lazy and they won't contribute. And you see, they get paid whether they contribute anything, whether they say anything or not, see? And you know the way our congressional business is being carried on nowadays. Being a senator is, well, it's not, a congressman is not much. It just really consists in receiving telegrams. That's about all it is. Just get up and see how many telegrams you got. And these poor fellas, you know they are. I've got great sympathy for our lawmakers. They're just devil to death. Do this or we'll defeat you. Another telegram says if you don't do this, we'll defeat you. And the poor fellas, you know, the legislatures, their lives are just made unhappy. I come to the conclusion that they have a pretty tough time. Well, maybe they get paid good. We'll admit that. They're paid well, but considering their worry, they earn it. You take thousands and millions of our worthy people are on relief now. Well, they are the ones that everybody naturally sympathizes with. But they have one thing that they can be proud of. Maybe though they do no fault of their own, they're on relief or something, but they have one consolation over a congressman or a senator. They can receive a letter and open it without being called a horse thief or a demagogue or a man that's going to poison a well where the orphans drink just to get elected or something. And that's what the poor old lawmaker receives every time he opens his mail. Well, that's a good deal for me to say about them, but I mean, I really feel that they are having a tough time. And the rich man, he's in trouble. Nobody is living in more fear than he is today. He's afraid Roosevelt's going to sneak up on him in the night and sandbag him and take all he's saved. Then the ordinary, well-to-do man, or medium class, he thinks he's carrying the whole load. And last, Mr. Roosevelt, his troubles, he's got a lot of troubles besides re-election, I'll tell you that. He's got more worries than all the others. And so it just looks like a time when everybody thinks that somebody else is oppressing him, you know. We are living in an age, you know, when everybody's got it in for us, oppressing us in some way. If the rich are worried, and the senators are worried, and the congressman is worried, and the president is worried, and the middle class is worried, it just looks like when you add it all up, why, nobody seems to have got the best of it anyhow. So, you know, everything's about equal. And if all of them would just quit laying it on to the others for causing their ills and admit, well, maybe I had something to do with it myself, you know. Maybe my troubles are not all somebody else's. And when it's all said and done, you know, maybe none of them, maybe all of them ain't as bad off as we think we are, you know. But we have got a complex now that where we just everything. Any class, one class is arrayed against another one against another one, and that's the way we're going through. And none of us will admit that maybe we was in the wrong. Wait a minute here, thank God, man. Well, thank you. That's right. I'll finish this thing next Sunday night. My oration on this. Big plan for fathers next Sunday night. Thanks.
don't get scared and start turning off your radios. I'm not advertising or trying to sell you anything. If the mouthwash you're using is not the right kind and it tastes sort of like sheep dip, why, you just have to go right on using it. I can't advise any other kind at all. And if the cigarettes that you're using, why, if they don't lower your Adam's apple, why, I don't know of any that will. You just have to cut out apples, I guess. That's the only thing I know. Now, Mr. Owen Young asked me to annoy on this program this evening. You all know Mr. Owen D. Young, you know. He's the only sole surviving wealthy Democrat. Wealthy Democrat asked me to do anything, I had to do it, see. Well, Mr. Young, he's head of the Young Plan, you know. He's the originator of the Young Financial European Plan. He's head of Young Men's Temperance Union and originator of Young's Markets and Young Kippa. And they was the first Democratic child born of white parents in Youngstown, Ohio. He started the Young Plan in Europe. That was that every nation pay just according to what they could afford to pay, see? And, well, somebody else come along with an older plan than Young's plan, and it was that nobody don't pay anybody anything. And, of course, that's the oldest plan there is. And that's the one they're working under now. That's why we ain't getting anything from Europe. So when Mr. Young asked me to appear, why, I said, well, I'm kind of particular. I said, who's going to be the other speaker? Who else is on the bill with me? And he said, well, how would Mr. Hoover do? Well, I slightly heard of him, you know, and I said, well, I'll think it over. So I looked into Mr. Hoover's record and inquired of everybody. And after I had kind of thrown out about 2/3 of what the Democrats said about him, why, I figured that I wouldn't have much to lose by appearing with Mr. Hoover. So I'm here this evening appearing on the bill with Mr. Hoover. So now I expect you won't hear any more of Amos and Andy. It'll just be Hoover and Rogers from now on. Now we're reading the papers every day, and they get us all excited over the one or a dozen different problems that's supposed to be before this country. There's not really but one problem before the whole country at this time. It's not the balancing of Mr. Mellon's budget. That's his worry. That ain't ours. And it's not the League of Nations that we read so much about, or it's not the silver question. The only problem that confronts this country today is that at least 7 million people are out of work. That's our only problem. There is no other one before us at all. It's to see that every man that wants to, able to work, is allowed to find a place to go to work, and also to arrange some way of getting a more equal distribution of the wealth in country. Now, it's prohibition. We hear a lot about that. Well, that's nothing to compare to your neighbor's children that are hungry. It's food. It ain't drink that we're worried about today. Here a few years ago, we were so afraid that the poor people were liable to take a drink that now we've fixed so they can't even get something to eat. So here we are in a country with more wheat and more corn and more money in the bank and more cotton, more everything in the world. There's not a product that you can name that we haven't got more of it than any country ever had in the face of the earth. And yet we've got people starving. We'll hold the distinction of being the only nation in the history of the world that ever went to the poorhouse in an automobile. The potter's field are lined with granaries full of grain. Now, if there ain't something cockeyed in an arrangement like that, then this microphone here in front of me is, well, it's a cuspidor, that's all. Now, I think that perhaps they'll arrange it. I think our big men will perhaps fix some way of fixing a different distribution of things. If they don't, they're certainly not big men and won't be with us long. That's one thing. Now, I say, and have always claimed, that things would pick up in 32. 32, why 32? Well, because 32 is an election year, see? And the Republicans always see that everything looks good on election year, see? They give us 3 good years and one bad one. No, 3 bad ones and 1 good one. I like to got it wrong. That's the Democrats does the other. They give us three bad years and 1 good one, but the good one always comes on the year that the voting is, see? So, the Democrats are always just 1 year late with our elections, see? Now, if they was running this year, well, they'd be all right, but they're 1 year late. Everything will pick up next year and be fine. These people that you're asked to aid, they're not asking for charity. They're naturally asking for a job. But if you can't give them a job, why, the next best thing you can do is see that they have food and the necessities of life. There's not one of us that has anything, but these people that are without it now haven't contributed to what we've got. I don't suppose there's the most unemployed or the hungriest man in America has contributed in some way to the wealth of every millionaire in America. It wasn't the working class that brought this condition on at all. It was the big boys themselves who thought that this financial drunk we were going through was going to last forever. They over-merged and over-capitalized and over everything else. That's the fix that we're in now. Now, I think that every town and every city will raise this money. In fact, they can't afford not to. They've got the money because there's as much money in the country as there ever was. Only the fewer people have it, but it's there. And I think the towns will all raise it, because I've been on a good many charity affairs all over the country, and I have yet to see a town or a city ever fail to raise the money when they knew the need was there and they saw the necessity. Every one of them will come through. Europe don't like us, and they think we're arrogant and bad manners and have a million faults, but every one of us every one of them, they give us credit for being liberal. Doggone it, the people are liberal. Our Americans, I don't know about America being fundamentally sound and all that after dinner hooey, but I do know that America is fundamentally liberal. Now, I want to thank Mr. Gifford, the head of this unemployment, thank Mr. Young, and I certainly want to thank Mr. Hoover for the privilege of being allowed to appear on the same program with him, because I know that this subject is very dear to Mr. Hoover's heart. I know that he'd rather see the problem of unemployment solved than he would to see all the other problems he has before him combined. And if every town and every city will get out and raise their quota, what they need for this winter, why, it'll make him a very happy man. And happiness hasn't been a steady diet with our president. He's had a very tough, uphill fight, and this will make him feel very good. And he's a very human man. I thank you. Good night.
Thank you, Will Rogers. And now back to New York.
For more information on hundreds of cassette products, write to Adventures in Cassettes, P.O. Box 11041, Minneapolis, Minnesota 55411.